My friend 122 Nerd has not responded. He told me that he would respond in a couple of days. In the interim, a couple of you have asked or made statements that have to be addressed. And so, as a sequel, I wish to add the following. For about 2,500 years, the world of thinking believed in a static universe, that is, a universe that always was. And there were philosophical arguments as to whether that was possible or not, but the philosophers of the Greeks, as well as the scientists of the ages, all wanted and therefore believed in a static universe. That means a universe where things always were. Now, forget about the arguments as to whether this actually could occur or not, but this is what they believed. And when Mr. Hubble, the astronomer, began to observe that the universe looked as if it was the result of the Big Bang, Professor Albert Einstein himself altered his own formulas so as to allow for a static universe. In other words, according to Einstein's own formula, the Big Bang was not just a possibility, but indeed this was the way it occurred. The universe came from an infinitesimal point. This idea that the universe came from an infinitesimal point is exactly the concept of Bereshis Bara, that God created the universe from nothing. And this ran contrary to the sentiments of the scientists, and therefore, hurriedly, Einstein himself altered his own formula and eventually had to retract. And so, the concept of science, that science finds the answers to things, is a falsehood, it's a fallacy. Science does not necessarily find the... In fact, as we go along, we find that many of the concepts are just too elusive. We can't understand how they work. We just know the mechanics that they do work. And we've been able to create models to allow us to deal with how things work, despite the fact that they're quirky and unpredictable. So the concept that science somehow or other has figured out how things really are and why things are is a fallacy. Science can describe why or how certain things work, and to a certain degree describe with accuracy that given certain conditions, the things will continue to work in this particular way. But science has never been able to get to the root cause of things as to why things are the way they are. Science can't figure out why there's gravitational attraction and why the speed of light is the way it is, and why light has the functions as that it does, that it has apparently no mass, no appreciable mass, and why space and time are the way they are and the interrelationships that they have. Science has not been able to explain that at all. In fact, there are things that happen that are absolutely mystical. The idea that there are two possibilities for a light wave to emerge in a certain direction, and that where it emerges is dependent upon the observer. This is nothing less than either science fiction or Kabbalistic thinking. And in truth, this is the most modern thinking. The most modern thinking is that the observer actually helps actualize the place or the identity of the basic elements of the universe. And so the consciousness of a human being is part of the actualization process of things in the world. In other words, the observer makes for the reality, which is an incredible, incredible concept. And we have no clue as to why it works that way. We just know that it does. And so, in response to all my atheistic friends, you haven't answered a thing by saying science. Science hasn't answered a single basic point of reality. Science observes, science sees how things work, and based upon that creates certain formula, and given those formula to a certain degree of accuracy, they will be able to predict events within a certain range, given the range of without certain variables changing markedly. Science has not been able to explain why things are. That's a lot of baloney. And ultimately, today's most modern science is mystical. You have Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and the things that come as a result of that, and all different kinds of ideas that today are remarkably close to the concepts of the Jewish thought and Kabbalah. So science is not a book of answers as to why. Science is a book about what and how, but you'll never get to why. That's number one. And number two, what I said about time, but something causing the origin of the universe, is an absolute, incontrovertible truth. There is nothing that has ever been presented by any of the scientists or any of the philosophers over time that will answer this particular point. And I know that Maimonides accepted Aristotle's position that everything is like a great circle, but if you accept that things are like a great circle that are never ending, you'll also have to say that the grandson is the grandfather of the grandfather, and that's absurd. And so without going into details too much, this is enough for this particular segment. Science has answered nothing. It has expanded our understanding of what exists and how we could predict further events, but has not and ever been able to explain